This is Remo Daily, your daily dose of inspiration. This is Remo Daily, an oasis of innovation for your mind, your soul, and your heart. Connect, act, and recharge with Remo Daily. This is Remo Daily.
Oh, never heard that version before. Amazing. Thank you, Dario. And
Monday,
please welcome with a big round of applause the founder of Untapped New York here on Remote Daily, Michelle Young. Hi.
Hi.
Great to have you.
Great to be here.
Michelle, how are you? How's your inner Michelle doing these days?
Well, it's been a really crazy, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months. How long has it been? I've lost track. We've learned a lot. We're pretty tired. I'm going on vacation Friday, so I'm pretty excited to get to France and to get 2 weeks off and then get back to it.
And some noon wine, as the chat keeps recommending to you. Yes, I'm excited for you to get a change of scenery. I may ask you to start at the beginning though, because born and raised New Yorker, part of a big city, but how did you start becoming so interested in cities that you decided to make this your livelihood?
Yeah, I would probably place it in two different kind of origin stories, but I actually grew up originally on Long Island, and I went to Juilliard as a child for cello.
Wow.
And so I would go every Friday or Saturday with my mom or dad, who would drive me in to Manhattan. So we would cross the bridge, usually the Triborough Bridge or the Queensboro Bridge, and kind of get that amazing skyline of New York City. And that quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald about the city seen from the Queensboro Bridge is the city seen for the first time is like something that is just like when I read it in 7th grade, I was like, that is it, and that's me. And I feel like I've been privy
Beautiful.
to the real evolution of New York City. My parents came here in the 70s from Taiwan. They have stories about how it was super dangerous. My mom was a social worker in Alphabet City. My dad was mugged coming out of Barnes and Noble in Union Square. And then Lincoln Center, when I was, my parents then bought a place when I was at Juilliard, was a place nobody really wanted to live in and live around. And now we know what the Upper West Side and Lincoln Center and Columbus Circle are like. So I've really always been fascinated by this constant change that is New York. But, you know, there was a long process to get here because after college, I went with whatever company would hire me out of Harvard, and that turned out to be Abercrombie and Fitch. So I worked in fashion for 5 years as a merchandiser and buyer for companies like Abercrombie, then Calvin Klein and J. Crew. And then in my mid-20s, I discovered that I did not like doing that, that fashion was not the future for me. And so that was kind of a tough time because I had, you know, spent my whole life kind of getting to a career and then deciding that it wasn't going to be was a tough moment. So I looked around my apartment in kind of like a panic. And I noticed that every book in my apartment was about architecture or cities or old houses or the Gilded Age or something like that. And so that really struck me. I was like, oh, that's my interest. And when I was in college, I majored in the history of art and architecture. So the next few years after that was about getting back into that and figuring out where in architecture, city building that I wanted to focus in. So I ended up going to grad school for urban planning at Columbia, which is where I teach now in the architecture department. And while I was doing that, I think the summer before, I created a website called Untapped New York. And the idea then was to discover cool places, fun places, things that maybe even native New Yorkers hadn't heard about, and to bring people with me on them. So the early articles were about, hey, we're going to go to Fresh Kills landfill and go take the tour there of like the world's largest landfill and different things. So there was always this sense of community and of being very open about what we were doing, and just trying to really celebrate everything that everyone has mentioned already here today about what is amazing about New York, and also being really humble at the fact that we'll never know everything about New York, and that's why it's amazing. So that's sort of the origin of it. And yeah.
And then you ended up turning this into a business, which is incredible, and had a lot of challenges, I suppose. And you have now been running this for, I think, more than a decade. So
Yeah.
how did you actually turn this into a business? How can you turn a love for New York and its architecture into something that, you know, gives you a livelihood?
Yeah, so that was definitely a hard road. I now tell people, if you want to start something, always have a business model in mind. So don't do what I did, which is just out of like pure inspiration, throw something on the internet and then spend many years trying to figure it out. So around the time that I went to grad school and a little bit after, I realized that this is what I wanted to do. And I had a lot of support from my teachers and my fellow students who wanted to write and contribute. And after working for a year in a finance company after grad school, I decided that this was really what I wanted to do, at least for my life or in the long term. And so at that point, I was trying to figure out, okay, we have an editorial magazine and we had started to test out tours, but we didn't create tours to make money. So once again, going with a business model. But we created the tours originally because we wanted to meet the people who were reading our magazine. And we met amazing people, really fun people who are continue to be contributors and tour guests today. And we kind of realized the demand for it by putting some tours out there. I brought Augustin here to kind of talk about that because he's the business mind behind everything. And I tried for many years to get him to join the company, and we can also talk about what it's like to work with your spouse. But I really wanted him to work with me, and after he decided at one point to leave his marketing job at L'Oreal, and I was like, yes, this is the moment.
Amen.
Yeah, and so he can talk
here
about
he is.
the strategic side of it, but he turned our tours, kind of our foray into tours, into a big thing.
Thank you so much for sharing this journey, Michelle. I mean, it's just remarkable, from Juilliard being on the course for music, and then going on this course of fashion and retail, and then ending up running something that nobody has ever done before. And maybe, Augustin, it would be, for the moment we're in, maybe you can describe how the pandemic has actually impacted the business that you have built around membership, experiences, and of course an ad-driven website. What happened?
Yeah, so as Michelle was saying earlier, originally Untapped was just counting on ad revenue. So we always had like very good page views because of Michelle's great idea of covering New York City's secrets and hidden gems, which is very appealing to a broad number of people, whether they live in New York or are about to visit New York, or just wish they lived in New York, or are old New Yorkers who don't live in New York. I mean, like former New Yorkers, regardless of the age. And so we only counted on like ad revenues, which only brings you so far because you know, people are not like itching to get home to like click on ads, you know, like they want to do other things in their life than just like click on ads. So we decided early on to diversify the business, and we realized that people don't come to us because they want to read an article necessarily. They come to us because they want to discover something, and because they want to discover, we realized that if we were doing tours, we could like bring this discovery just consumable in a different way. So we diversified early on from ad revenue to then ads plus tours, and then membership, where some people are monthly members, and that supports us. And we bring them into the most off-limits places in New York City, the places where we can't really organize tours like regularly. And so when we arrived, to answer your question, when the pandemic hit, we had already like a diversified business with 3 different revenue streams. But the majority of our
took a complete nosedive probably around the experiences and
like,
and all that. Right?
We spent years building like tours, and then lockdown, so we couldn't bring people on tours anymore. So this was the majority of our revenue. And then we converted the we pivoted our experiences to online experiences so that our members are really like who we love and who are absolutely great and who are very passionate New Yorkers, who are really the heart and soul of our audience. They're great. We give them like online experiences every week where we bring them virtually into like places or explore specific topics with them. So yeah, so the pandemic was definitely an
So
interesting.
instead of visiting Hart Island or going to North Brother Island, where the pandemic hospital used to be, all these things that you have given people access to, now I experience that through Zoom or video.
Exactly. So then we
in
offer
some
them,
regard.
we offer either we have a guide who has like a stabilizer and he's giving our insiders a tour
Okay.
of Victorian Flatbush if you want to explore the spectacular mansions that are in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And you can engage with him live
Okay, I see.
or we can give talks on specific topics like the cats of nautical New York with an author who wrote a book about cats and things like this.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Augustin. And this is not of course, a way of promoting your platform over and over, but I think it's a very interesting way of looking at how tour companies or how experiential companies these days can survive and how they might continue into the future. So thank you for sharing this with us. And Michelle just got connected here on the chat, but also shared a link to stay for 2 months free on your platform, experience all these experiences and dive into the virtual way of Untapped New York. Now let's open up to the bigger picture, because I mean, you have been through a lot, you two. You have had copycats on your site. You have built this, weathered a lot of storms, but you have created this amazing gem. And it has expanded into, Michelle, I think you especially being kind of like as Augustin said, the face of the platform, venturing out there in the city every day to participate in movies and Netflix documentaries and becoming an explainer for kind of like what urban life is or what urban living is could be in the future. So maybe as an opening question for that, to you, Michelle, as an architecture professor, but also as an author and Untapped chief adventurer, what do you wish more people knew about cities, just in general?
I definitely wish people knew more about how they can get involved in how the city is shaped. And that can be just learning how, for example, zoning works. I think people get frustrated when they think they can't influence and they don't understand the process. But for example, I had to take a real estate class about zoning when I was in school. And I already felt like I knew a bit about New York, but it was just like boggling. I suddenly realized exactly why the skyline has that shape. And that comes from the history of many different regulations that have come in to play in New York. And, you know, even very mundane buildings, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the tower on the base, look, all through the Upper East Side, right? And secondly, I think there are a lot of ways to get involved that are open to the public. So one of the things we had written about a couple years ago was about how to go to a public hearing at City Hall. I was part of the movement to try to open up more park spaces to the public. A lot of the buildings and places like North Brother Island, for example, are closed to the public. And so there was a public hearing and anyone could attend, and you just needed to show up at City Hall. So for us, it's about providing information and kind of sharing with people that it's not a scary thing. I mean, before that, I didn't even know exactly how to get into City Hall. So it can be not an easy thing and can be daunting. But those things are available to the public to speak their mind. And then of course there are other ways to get involved in, you know, your local community board or such. But I strongly believe that if we understand how cities, whatever city, its history and how it operates, we can find ways for each of us to get involved in some way to help shape its future.
And what do you think is the impact of the many pandemics we are in right now on the urban experience?
So I think one of the great things that has come out of this pandemic is the rearrangement and reuse of public spaces and abandoned spaces and such. So I'm speaking about the opening of streets, taking over of parking spots for restaurants. My favorite restaurant got to take over the abandoned lot next door to have outdoor dining. These are initiatives and concepts that urban planners and other urbanists have been pushing, and even residents have been asking for a long time. But when we aren't able to see them out in action, it's hard to galvanize the public behind it. So what's very exciting for me now is I feel like there's been almost overwhelmingly positive feedback to the open streets. Of course, there are some incidents we've been reading about people crowding and such, but overall, the idea that a restaurant can extend out into the street and we can have street life, we can have music playing on the street, I think is a great thing. And I think our experience now, we will see more concrete proposals in place for the future. And another thing that I'm really liking is the explosion of alternate means of transportation. So my favorite thing, actually, one of my favorite things about New York City is the transit system. I'm obsessed. A lot of people are. And now I think people are looking for alternate ways that they perceive maybe to be safer, which I understand. So I think the more means of transportation we have, the better. And it's exciting to see, you know, Revel taking off, City Bike. I think they actually celebrated their 1,000,000th ride yesterday. And even buses. I wrote one of my first urban planning papers about bus rapid transit system around the world and how New York can do it and how the New York system is not really bus rapid transit. So to see like bus numbers jump during this is super exciting. And the last thing I've been really thinking about a lot is about how we can design better for empathy. I think what we've discovered in a lot of cities as they become, you know, wealthier cities is that we don't have as much access to people that are not like us. And we come to New York because we want that. We want to be able to see different colors of people, different races, and, you know, people from all different backgrounds. And the more a city, you know, develops in a traditional way, the more isolated these neighborhoods get, and we see less. But what I learned during this pandemic is the apartment building that we lived in Brooklyn has a shared common walkway and front terraces. So first, outdoor space is going to be a big thing in new construction for sure. But second, we actually had a very almost pleasant pandemic experience in our apartment building because we could actually safely social distance, but be outside with our neighbors whom we already knew very well. I feel like I've never lived in any other apartment building in which I knew my neighbors so well. And so if we can find ways to design better for a better shared environment, but with ways that we can interact with populations that we might not normally interact with, I think that'll be a real plus coming out.
This of course brings me to the question how New York is going to come back. We already have some, I think Tommy mentioned in the chat, the exodus. So we see a certain number of people leaving the city, and many of them might not come back. There's a somewhat of a flight to the suburbs going on right now. And from other crises that New York has been through, we know that this can take a few years to actually swing back. There's also the discussion about how many people will rely on cars because they feel uncomfortable in the subway, running into a grid system that might be expanded for bikers, for cyclists. So now a lot of urbanists are looking at Europe and Amsterdam and other cities, but how do you really see New York coming back? And especially in this, you know, conundrum of, well, a lot of people sharing very little space.
Yeah, so I mean, the private car ownership is definitely very concerning. I count myself sort of as one of those because we took my parents' car before the pandemic, which was actually a godsend. But in general, so long term, I'm not worried about New York City. Augustin and I closed on a new place that we're renovating at the end of January, sold our place in the midst of the pandemic. So, you know, business is continuing. I think with every major moment in New York, whether it was 9/11 or it does take time. You know, it might take 5-10 years. I don't know what the timeline is, but I have seen that New York is always a draw. So, you know, even if there is a brain drain right now, when things go back to normal, business will normalize. So I think we should all wait it out. But I also think that the concerns about fleeing are a little bit exaggerated. Most people I know who are, writers, creatives, etc., teachers, seem to have no interest in leaving town. So
okay. Lots of anecdotal wisdom until we really know what's going on. Everybody's looking at their peer group and saying what is really up. But I agree with you. A lot of us just can only judge the city or our lives through our windows right now and don't really know the big picture. So yeah, thank you for reminding us of that. And may I also ask you, New Yorkers also love to complain, and we don't like Bill de Blasio and all that stuff. But is there somebody in New York that you really admire at this moment? How they maybe have been pulling through these last couple of months?
I have to think about someone specific, but really, again, seeing the tweets and hearing from a lot of photographers and writers that either work for us or that I know or have worked for us, and their commitment to continue to report about what's happening, despite losing. Many of them have lost their jobs, and the fact that they don't want to leave New York City is extremely inspiring. And I do hope that bodes well for the future of New York City in general, that these creatives want to stay and are fighting to stay. So that I do really appreciate.
And now, of course, I have to ask you to geek out. Since I came here, I have been wondering, how do I get into the Chrysler Building? How do I get up there? There's these meandering questions that every New Yorker has, and how to get to these hidden spots. So that might be a very private question I have for you, but the bigger question: what are 3 spots that you would recommend right now for everybody who's here to visit? Okay,
maybe Augustin can also join in. So one of the things that we did want to announce is that we are resuming our public tours. Someone had asked that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so actually we could have resumed in phase 3, but we kind of wanted to get everything down pat and also anticipate whether people are going to be ready to come out. And we've got all new kind of health and safety measures, et cetera, to do our part. So on that, we will be doing a tour of Victorian Flatbush that Augustin mentioned, but we're also doing a canoe tour of the Gowanus Canal. So the Gowanus Canal is something that's in our book, Secret Brooklyn, but there is a boat club there that we're working with, and that's a great way to social distance, learn about the history of New York, industrialization and pollution, if that's your thing, and be out on the water.
If I may jump in, they're called the Gowanus Dredgers, and they're a great organization with great people, and we highly recommend, while it might not be top of mind, but exploring the Gowanus Canal in canoe. It is a unique experience. It
is just the most polluted water in the United States, so no worries
Absolutely.
at all. You will come out alive.
When you're on it, you see like bubbles that look like rainbow, because it's like the tar going up that comes to the surface, and in all its grossness, it's absolutely magical, because you have like bubbles of rainbows that are coming to the surface. It's fantastic.
And you also see like the amount of wildlife that actually lives there. I found like mollusks, there were birds, there was a crab, wow. So tells you a lot about how nature can survive. Where else? I think I'm a big fan of the parks in southern Brooklyn. So that includes like Floyd Bennett and Dead Horse Bay and Marine Park particularly.
Cool.
Oh, Christopher asked, do you need a canoe? We'll be providing canoes. So, and there will be experts to guide us. So I believe children can join. Those actually will be announced tomorrow on our website. So we're pretty excited about that.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And maybe as a closing question, Michelle, you have a wonderful little daughter. What do you think is a story from these months that you will tell your daughter one day?
So having a daughter in this pandemic was both like incredible and extremely exhausting, and pulling your hair out. But we got to spend so much time with her that we would not have normally been able to. So the memories that she'll have and we have of this critical time, you know, she was 2.5 when the pandemic started. She'll be 3 in September. Are really, really priceless. I think, well, she basically learned French during this time. We were really worried about her not being able to speak French. And so that took care of it. I don't know.
Thanks,
I
Dad.
think, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, Augusta, what else would you say about our time with Charlotte?
I was asking about a story. So if there's a specific moment that you would like to share. Augustin, I saw you on Twitter cooking with your in-laws.
Yes, yeah. We relocated to Long Island with Michelle's parents for a few months, for many weeks, and so yeah, I've been learning how to cook with my with Michelle's grandmother, who's probably 92-year-old. So I'm the stereotypical French guy. I love cooking, and so she's teaching me like all her like Taiwanese recipes. So that's really cool. So we still had some good moments in this pandemic, and yeah, it was fun.
You know, I would end with, I took Charlotte wherever I needed to go when we were in New York City. So we left mid-June or beginning of June. But before that, I was really out and about every day, taking pictures, covering things. And Charlotte came with me everywhere, whether she was napping or she had woken up. And so one day I had to go take a picture of a manhole cover. It's the oldest in New York City, and it's across from the Port Authority. FYI for everyone. And then I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to go up to Yonkers. So let's go up to Yonkers. And the traffic wasn't bad during this time period, right? So I drove up to Yonkers.
Just zigzagging through the city was no problem at all for the first and maybe last time. Yeah,
and I went to take pictures of a former railway that used to be there. But there's also an amazing park that is part of a river that was, they call it daylighting. So it was covered by industry, and they decided to uncover it again. And it's this beautiful park, and I've been wanting to go there when the weather is, yes, do people say that I've been wanting to go to Yonkers? Yep. Actually really beautiful stuff there. And so that park called the Sawmill River, maybe Sawmill River Park, is facing a train station that was built by the same architects as Grand Central. So it's really beautiful. And it's one of the most amazing kind of urban transformations I've seen. And so the fish are coming back. A lot of wildlife is coming back.
Wonderful.
And so I hope she'll remember that. You know, we were looking at the mosaics of turtles, and a woman came by and said, you know, there's a real turtle. So we went looking for the real turtle. And kind of these like glimmers of like hope and life during the pandemic.
Thank you so very much, Michelle and Augustin. You're not only amazing parents and business people, you also, I guess, re-injected a great hope into New York, into all of us, and a somewhat sense of there's life out there that's worth living and checking out. And there's a very easy answer to the question how we can help you. You opened up your tours today again. Join the platform, become a member, and venture out with these amazing individuals and their huge group of guides and their community. I can only highly recommend it.